Hi, welcome to another episode of The Amanda Show. My name is Amanda Akalano, and on this show, as usual, we discuss the current happenings in Africa so that we can trigger debate and pick conversations. Hopefully, we can find solutions to the several issues that are plaguing the continent today. Well, on this episode of The Amanda Show, we are going to be discussing three topics. The first topic, what is ongoing in Kenya. So, the young people in Kenya are protesting a tax reform that President Ruto has just put into place. After discussing what's happening in Kenya, we are going to move over to the beautiful country of Sudan. It's been over a year now, a year and some months that Sudan has been plagued with the civil war. So something happened at the UN um, Security Council this week. Something happened where there was a brawl between war of words, if I may say. There was a war of words between the Sudanese and the Emiratis. So Sudan is accusing the UAE of supporting the Rapid Support Force (RSF). I believe that's Rapid Support Force. I'll put it the correct thing on the screen. So Sudan is accusing the UAE of supporting that paramilitary group. And then finally, we'll make our last stop in DRC. In case you didn't know, the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo is planning on taking legal actions against Apple because they are saying that Apple is buying literally or figuratively blood lithium. So they are planning on taking a lawsuit against Apple. Sit back, relax, and let's begin. Anyone who is following development in Africa would know that for some days now there's been protests in Kenya. And the interesting thing about this protest is that it's championed by young people, to be precise, Gen Z. So the young people in Kenya have taken the responsibility upon themselves to hold their government accountable. What are they protesting against? President Ruto came into power, and ever since he came into power, I believe in 2022, he has implemented quite a number of tax reforms. He has increased taxing in different areas. So now the people are tired. Apparently, Kenya has been experiencing cost of living crisis. The prices of things have skyrocketed. A lot of businesses are unable to cope under the pressure, and quite a number of businesses have closed shop. Now, in this economic environment, President Ruto thought it was a good idea. President Ruto thought it was a good idea to increase taxes. So he implemented taxing, or at least they proposed taxing in bread, um, if I'm not mistaken, cancer treatment, quite a number of things. And people were like, this doesn't make any sense. So Gen Z, the young generation, have taken to the streets and they've been protesting. Unfortunately, per report, it has led to the death of a young person in Kenya, one person, and a lot of people are injured. Now, here's the thing. When President Ruto came into office, before now, Kenya has been under quite a number of debts. They are owing a lot of people, and they are trying to pay it off. So Ruto inherited debt. And according to him, one of the reasons why he's implementing, at least he's increasing taxes in different areas, is for the government to be able to raise money to pay off its debt and also to run, because government needs money to run. Quite all right, I understand where he's coming from. But from my own end, I'm looking at it like, why are you squeezing the people? I mentioned earlier when we started this segment that Kenya is undergoing serious cost of living crisis. The prices of things have skyrocketed, from fuel to food to basic things, even sanitary pads. So things are really expensive. Businesses are finding it hard to run. And in the middle of all this pain, you're squeezing them more. You know, what are you trying to squeeze out? The people are already dry. What are you trying to squeeze out? And with the level of spike in the prices of things, businesses are closing down. And if you know anything about, no matter, even if it's basic economics, you know that the economy of a country runs on the number of businesses that are thriving. So if you're in a situation where the businesses are closing up, that's a sign that something is wrong. And it's not in that kind of circumstance that you increase tax. Me, if President Ruto is looking for money to run the government and pay off the debt that Kenya is owing, which is an honorable thing. But please, we can start with the money he spends on travel. To the best of my knowledge, all these foreign trips that presidents and government officials take, they're not cheap. It runs into millions of dollars. We can start from there. Cut down the number of foreign trips you make. President Ruto, ever since he got into office, he's been all over the place. Quite all right. It's very we can make an argument that he's trying to raise he's trying to attract foreign direct investment into his country. I get it. But at that, when you understand the circumstances of things, you cannot be taking foreign trips that runs into millions of dollars, and you still want to take the pennies that are in the pockets of Kenyans. So this is what has led the people to the streets. And this protest going on in Kenya now, it reminds me of something that happened in Nigeria in 2020, the NSAS protests, and it even became a movement from there. Like also, it was young people in Nigeria. They took to the streets to demand an end to the SARS. It was like an offshoot of the police force, but they went rogue. So like the Nigerian youth were demanding that it should be ended. Now, from Nigeria to Kenya. Also, if you saw what happened in Senegal before the new president came into office, President Faye, one of the people, at least the large chunk of people who led those protests, when the at least the last president, that is it President Sal? Yes, Sal. So when he tried to hijack the government to stall elections, the people who protested were young people. So we've seen that in Senegal. We've also seen it in we've seen it in South Africa, but it wasn't really protest in South Africa. It was the large chunks of people who went to vote, even when the ANC was feeling comfortable where they were and were not giving the people what the people had required. The large chunk of people who went to vote and they were decisive in that election were also young people. So if you look across Africa, you're noticing a trend, and that trend is young people are dissatisfied. Young people are dissatisfied. Last year at the Russia Africa Summit, the president of Burkina Faso, he's a young guy, he's in his 30s. I can't remember his exact age now, but he's in his 30s. He said something that was very striking. He said, how is it that African youths don't understand? How can it even be that we have all the minerals the world is running on? Everything the world needs is in Africa, and yet Africa is poor. It doesn't make any sense. So these are the kind of things that African youths are wondering, and these are the kind of things that are making them dissatisfied. You say, okay, the government is supposed to do this and this and this, and they travel, they see the way other countries are. They come home, and what is at home doesn't make any sense. Honestly, what is at home doesn't make any sense. So this is what the young people are seeing, and they're dissatisfied, and it makes me it's very inspiring because let me tell you why. It's signaling to me that the era of business as usual in Africa is over. How that era is over. Right now, our leaders think they can continue the way they've been doing for decades, but a time will come, everything will snap. And what do I mean by to snap? A time will come where young people will say, enough, enough, enough. This thing cannot continue anymore. When we saw the elections that happened in Nigeria last year, a large chunk of people who went out to vote to remove the current, well, to remove the current government, that was the government before this new one, were young people. And what was their argument? They said Nigeria has not worked, Nigeria has not favored us. We want something different. So the more dissatisfaction is in the hearts of Africans across the continent, the more we are going to see things like this. Quite right, right now it may just seem like, oh, they're just protesting. But that dissatisfaction is going to lead to more decisive actions beyond hitting the streets to protest. I'm predicting that more African youth are going to get into office, if not for anything, to remove this. I feel like African leaders, in as much as we like to um in as much as we like to say, well, they're puppets, blah, 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 they are doing the bidding of external players and all of that. But at the end of the day, they still have the buck stops with them. As much as we can say, or the external players are pulling the strings here and there, at the end of the day, the decision to be made is still with the leaders of Africa. So this behavior of not literally abdicating your duty. I mentioned in the last episode that we did. President Ruto President Ruto is everywhere. Russia Africa Summit. Okay, no, it wasn't at the Russia Africa Summit, but he was at the South Korea Africa Summit. He was at Italy Africa Summit. He was at US Africa Summit. He was at EU Africa Summit. All these things cost money. All these things cost money. So we can't be burning through funds like this. And instead of you to think of you tell the people to tighten their belts, but you refuse to tighten your own belt. It doesn't make any sense. So this is what the young people are seeing, and they're tired. Let's look at the number of people who are leaving Africa. In Nigeria, we're calling it Japa trend. The number of people who are relocating to other parts of the world where the countries are functioning. They're young people. You think that Kenya does not need its doctors and its nurses that are leaving the country? You think that Kenya doesn't need its entrepreneurs who are leaving the country for greener pastures? They are going to Dubai, they are going to London, to the United States. You think Kenya doesn't need those people? But they are leaving because they have looked and to them, this country is not working. It's not working. So what am I saying in essence? I'm saying something to African leaders. You need to realize that the era of doing business as usual is gone. We're in an era of awakened populace. And the more awakened the people are like this, the next thing you will see, they'll get into politics. That's what I usually advise African youths. Quite all right. But we are dissatisfied with the way things are going and the way things have gone for decades. Good. Take that anger and get into politics. You don't even need to run for office. You can begin by getting involved in party politics. So we've been told that when you come into when you vote your leaders in general election, that's how you can change your country. No, the real politics takes place in the party. I said all that to say African youths, as we are dissatisfied, we need to get into politics. Even if you don't run for office, do party politics because that is where the real leaders are chosen. So I'm looking at what's going on in Kenya. I'm looking at what's going on in Nigeria. I'm looking at South Africa. I'm looking at Egypt. All across Africa, the young people are dissatisfied. If you're tired of the way things are going, good. If you're tired of the way things are running, good. If you're angry with the way your country is, good. That anger should be the fuel you use to change your country, but you will change it in politics. Politics is one of the ways to change this thing. Politics is one of the ways to change this thing. The second thing is, I'm telling African leaders, it's time to hey, the lackadaisical way we have behaved, our leaders have behaved for decades. And in a few years, and I don't mean like 10, no, as little as 2 to 3 years, this thing will not continue. There's a movement taking place in Africa now that are going to flush out these leaders that don't perform. These leaders are just leaders in name, not in character, not in policies. They're just leaders in name. There's a movement that's going to flush these people out. And that's why I'm excited about Africa. Oh, I'm so excited. Look through history, not just in Africa, but history in general. Every time there has been mass dissatisfaction like it is, there has been change. So to the young people in Kenya, keep doing the good work. Protest peacefully, like you've already been doing. Protest peacefully. Keep doing the good work. And when the government makes the adjustments you're requiring, celebrate your victory. But don't look away from politics because that dissatisfaction in you, that anger in you, that craving more for your country in you, that is the fuel we are going to use to transform Kenya. And all across Africa, that is the fuel we are going to use to transform the continent. Now we get into our second conversation for today. At the United Nations Security Council, Sudan had an exchange of words with UAE. So Sudan is accusing the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, of supporting and funding the RSF. Now, for those who don't know, there's been an ongoing civil war in Sudan. It's between the government and the paramilitary RSF. So, and it's been going on since 2023 April. It's over a year now. So this civil war has led to the displacement of millions of Sudanese, millions. Some of them they've gone in as refugees into Egypt. They've gone into South Sudan and other neighboring countries. They've apart from the refugee crisis, those people who are still trapped within the country, there's mass starvation. There is disease outbreak. Um, there's been death. Thousands, tens of thousands of people have died. Hundreds of, maybe even more, have been injured. There's been instances of sexual abuse. It's been terrible. So this has been going on for over a year now. We're in June 2024. So over a year now, this has been going on. There's been efforts for peace. I know they've had some peace talks in Kenya. They've had some peace talks also. There's been efforts to make peace, but till now it hasn't turned out to be anything. Neither the government, the legitimate government of Sudan, or the RSF, nobody is budging. Well, that led us to this instance that happened at the UN Security Council, where Sudan criticized the UAE, accused them of supporting the RSF. Of course, definitely, after they said that, UAE denied it, and definitely they were going to deny it. Well, interestingly, some months ago, I saw a report in Middle East Eye, and in that report, the journalists actually accused UAE of funding and supporting the RSF with the blessing of Washington. I'll link it to this video. It was a detailed report, and this report didn't just point finger at UAE and Washington. It also points finger at some African countries who are working with these external players to support the RSF. I thought the right thing to do is that when there is war like this or when there is conflict like this, the most important thing for the continent is to ensure peace. That's the common sense thing. So this is this what when I saw that report, they called, for example, Uganda was mentioned in the whole thing, Libya was mentioned in the whole thing. Now, when I saw that report, I was so disappointed because how can African leaders, how can you allow yourself? Look at what's going on with the people in Sudan. Yes, you can say, oh, it's Game of Thrones, we are playing politics, and oh, okay, but what about the lives of Sudanese? Don't their lives matter? Don't these people's lives matter? That your name is being called into the conversation of people who are setting Sudan on fire. This is very terrible. This is very terrible. So when I saw that report, I had that in mind. Then the representative of the Sudan government at the United Nations requested that UAE be condemned for their activities in by backing the RSF. Now again, last this week, some days ago, I came across a report, but it was in a Romanian outlet, a Romanian media outlet. So I'm still going to link this one. But this one was written in Romanian. So I had to translate with Google Translate. That was how I was able to read it. But anyway, the the media outlet the report stated that United States is looking to get Ethiopia to also back the RSF. Back the RSF in what way? They're asking that Ethiopia provide um, mercenaries and also provide weapons to the RSF. In return, United States is going to recognize Somaliland. Here's what I have to say, and this is the reason I'm bringing this up. If you've noticed a pattern, the pattern is the main interests lie outside the continent. But these external players then work with internal players to get things done within the continent. That is not good for either the country or the continent at large. If you look at the map of Africa, you're going to see that Ethiopia and Sudan are close. They're really close. So I'm asking the Ethiopians if so the rumor is that the Ethiopian government is considering Washington's proposal. But I want to say to the Ethiopian government, look at the map of Africa. Look how close you are. How really close Ethiopia is to Sudan. Don't think that if you set Sudan on fire, the fire will not burn into your own country. Don't deceive yourself to think so. Yes, you may be looking for recognition of Somaliland because Ethiopia is also needs access to the sea. I think even at this point, we in Africa, we should be able to be our brother's keepers. Do you get? Even if you're having issue with your neighbor, doesn't mean like Ethiopia is a landlocked nation. Doesn't mean now that we can't do some things as simple as access to sea. We can partner within ourselves to use our seaports because we're all trying to grow together. But having said that, you in Ethiopia, don't forget that you also know what it means to be in civil war. Don't forget that you also know what conflict caused the nation. The Sudan wants this civil war is over in Sudan, Sudan would need billions of dollars, probably even tens of billions of dollars to get back on their feet. And it may even take a really long time. That's why we should not allow anywhere violence is. The first thing we should do is to put out the fire. Don't think you will burn your neighbor's house and the fire will not come into your own house. Don't deceive yourself. I think it was it's as early as 2022. You're just coming out of a conflict of your own. And the whole thing hasn't even subsided. Don't let anybody pull you into this thing. Don't allow it. We in Africa, we need to understand that nobody, no matter how friendly you are to an external player or how much you want to be in the good graces of some external player, there's nothing wrong in wanting to be in the good graces of anybody, especially world powers. There's nothing wrong. But if that thing will require you to set the continent on fire, run away from it. When I saw that report in Middle East Eye, the first thing that came to me was, why is this not a big conversation in Africa? Not yes, we know that there's a civil war going on in Sudan, but the fact that countries were mentioned, I would link the article. You can read it yourself. Countries like Uganda were mentioned, and there was nobody, there was no media outlet in Africa or supposedly working for the interest of Africa. No media outlet even called anybody from the government of Uganda to say, please, excuse me, there's been a report and alleging that you have a hand in the fire that is burning in Sudan. Can you please explain? Nothing. So I want you to understand something. See how things are going on in Israel and Palestine. The whole world is shouting. That's good. Things are going on between Russia and Ukraine. The whole world is shouting. That's good. But when it happens in Africa, it seems like Africa is just at the it's like the only time they make like the whole world remembers Africa is when they need our minerals, which I'm coming to in the next segment. That seems to be the only time that they remember Africa. So if you understand this is the situation, the way the world is already functioning, it's up to us to look out for each other. It's up to us to look out for each other. So not when we are calling the list of people who are setting Sudan on fire, and we'll be calling African nations. How about now? That's terrible. That's terrible. Speaking about how it seems like Africa is not in the mind of anybody. Yesterday, I was doing something on YouTube and I saw a post from Al Jazeera. And the post stated on YouTube, like these YouTube polls that are done. So the question was, which of these regions do you want? I'm paraphrasing now, but I'm going to find it and put it on the screen. Which of these regions do you want to find? Are you interested in more news stories from? And so there were four options. There was Middle East, there was Americas, there was Asia, and there was Europe. Africa was not there. They were listing the areas of the world and asking their viewers, which area do you like news from? And Africa was not there. Now the argument can be, well, in that YouTube poll, there's only space for four. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure if that is true. I'm going to check. But at least that's the argument that it can only be just four options. So that's why they were able to bring out only four. My counter argument is, if it's just four options, why didn't you do it Middle East slash Asia? Because the Middle East is in Asia. It's a part of Asia. So it's a region in Asia. So why don't you just put Asia slash Middle East to give real for Africa? So that post was, I thought it was very, hmm, it was very awakening for me. It was a real wake up moment for me because when push comes to shove, Africa is least of the world's worries. The only thing they based on history, the only thing they seem to want from Africa is what is under our rare earth minerals, what is under our ground. Because I don't know how a big media outlet like Al Jazeera will be asking their viewers, which area of the world do you like to get more news stories from? They give four areas Africa was missing, as though Africa doesn't matter to the world. So that's why I'm saying that we as Africa, all we have really is each other. So we need to get out of this habit of playing with external players to cause conflict within our countries and our continent and think it doesn't end up well for look, okay, let me give you another example. Look what happened with Thomas Sankara. We all know that it's not a secret anymore that it was the CIA doing the bidding of Belgium. No, external players in essence. Or who by whose hand did he die? An African. By whose hand did Thomas Sankara die? An African. Not just an African, his friend. But then what happened to Burkina Faso after he left? The country plunged into into a disaster. What happened to Burkina Faso? Are you following what I'm trying to say? So if we give ourselves this, if we keep behaving like this, at the end of the day, we're the only people who will lose. History has shown us there's several instances. So there's no how that Ethiopia or Uganda or Libya you think you can do and get it. Even Libya, you have experience of external players coming to set your country on fire. You have that experience. So work with outsiders, yes, but don't work with outsiders to the detriment of your country or the continent at large. At the end of the day, like I have said, all we have is each other. No, let's look at each other. Let's hold ourselves to account like brothers and sisters, like siblings, because that is the only way we can stand up and stand up with pride on the global stage. That's the only way we can stand with pride on the global stage when we stand together to pursue the interest of Africa. For our final conversation for today, we are going all the way to the Democratic Republic of Congo. So the government in the DRC is looking to take legal actions against Apple. Yes, Apple computers. Here's the thing. They're saying that Apple is getting illegal minerals from illegally exported minerals from DRC. Here's the thing. To the best of my knowledge, DRC is filled with the choicest minerals, all the rare earth minerals we need for today, particularly lithium that we need for and cobalt, lithium and cobalt that we need for batteries, for all and this green energy transition. All of these things in DRC. In fact, I've heard a lot of people say that this is the reason why it seems like no matter what is done, this terrorism and insurgency in DRC never ceases to grow. For example, the terrorists are occupying the choicest area in DRC and they are mining these minerals and they're exporting it. So apparently, many of these things are mined and then sent through Rwanda. Then it's processed in Rwanda and then added to the global supply chain. The government of DRC wants this to stop and it makes sense. But I have two things to say. In our last segment, I mentioned this thing, and I'm going to reiterate it now. Africa needs to stop this thing of literally plunging the continent into chaos at the bidding of external players. Because why is Rwanda's name coming into this conversation? This conversation of illegally taking minerals from the DRC. Why is Rwanda's name in that conversation? Why? If you have seen many of these mines in the DRC, where um these minerals are mined. Young children are bringing this thing out from the earth. Children. It's very interesting. The world says a lot of things about human rights, children's rights, but when it comes to actual practice, it's not really practiced. And when it's not practiced, people don't really bat an eye. They don't bat an eye. Because what is going on with child labor, not just that, like inhumane child labor in DRC, is supposed to trigger global anger. But no, it's not. Yet they come and tell us human rights. Are these children in Rwanda, is it not part, sorry, these children in DRC, are they not part of human rights? Are they not humans? Don't they have rights? It's very painful. And that's why it's really upsetting that Rwanda's name, on several occasions, I have heard the president of DRC accuse the president of Rwanda of sponsoring insurgency in his country. I've heard him say that several times. But the president of Rwanda is someone that I have come to respect because of what he has done for his country. So I've come to respect him, and I find it hard to put his name in such a conversation. But at this point, it's saddening. If terrorists are illegally mining rare earth minerals DRC, and then the government in Rwanda wants to tell me that they don't know. Okay, now that we have announced it, what are they going to do about it? That is one end of this. The other end of this conversation is all these big corporations. This thing that they said that at least it's alleged that Apple is doing and allowing. In fact, Apple is, when you buy, it's just like when they say don't buy blood diamonds because you're sponsoring conflicts and everything. When you buy blood lithium and blood cobalt, when you buy blood lithium and blood cobalt and child labor cobalt, is it not the same? Is it not supposed to be looked at with the same disgust? Is it not supposed to be looked at with the same disgust? The thing that Apple is being accused of doing in DRC is alleged that Apple is doing in DRC. They can't do it in their countries. Sometimes you look at what Shell and all these big corporations, these big oil corporations have done in oil-rich African countries like Nigeria. You see the way they just take out the thing and not even care, without care, not for the environment, not for the people living in the area, nothing. They just take it out and they just go. Take it with such brazen disrespect. I saw a video of those were Chinese in a certain region in Nigeria is rich in gold, and so the Chinese are illegally mining. The small scale miners. So they are working with small scale miners to take the gold. Hmm. I don't know if it's the Chinese government, but I know that Chinese nationals that were apprehended in it. If you see what they did to the land, the way they mine this thing, the land has been completely destroyed. The vegetation around now, if now the way it was mined, it's causing flooding into neighboring villages. So then I ask myself, what these people do this thing in China? Do this thing like this in China? They will not. So why is it that you have respect to behave properly in your own country? Then when you come to Africa, you just behave like you have no idea of law and order. They just behave anyhow. As in the southwestern part of Nigeria, rich in gold. In fact, how I even watched it, that it was a documentary by a Nigerian TV station on the matter, and so it was the Oba, that's the king of that village, who called the press to show them what the Chinese nationals have done to their land. They so decimated this thing. They so decimated this land. You would weep, but they will not do that thing in China. Look at what Shell, Mobile, doing in Nigeria. Go to Bayelsa, look at the way they take the oil. Go to rivers. They do this thing so disrespectful. They will not do it in the United States. They won't do it in the United Kingdom. They won't do it in France. They won't do it in Netherlands. Why did you do it in Nigeria? Why are you doing now? Now Apple is allegedly buying blood minerals from DRC. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? I said this thing before. See, for Africa to really work, in as much as we realize that, oh, we are different countries and work in the interest of our country, but we also need to remember that outside of this continent, I don't think the world, the global community really puts too much mind to African matters. I'm serious. Because the way they overlook many of the human rights abuses in Africa, it's like just look away. If it happens in somewhere in Europe, oh my God. Hey, if it happens in somewhere in Europe, you will not hear the end of it. You will not hear the end of it. But it happens in Africa every day, every day, every day. Nothing. Since 2022, we've been hearing Russia, Ukraine. Since 2023, um we've been hearing Israel, Palestine. And don't get me wrong, it's important to talk about this conflict. But how many times do we hear what is going on in the DRC? The DRC is on fire. The same thing in the last segment I spoke about Sudan. Sudan is on fire. How many times do we hear about these things? I just mentioned to you also that a big media outlet like Al Jazeera was listing the regions of the world where asking their audience, where do you like, which area do you like to hear more news on? And Africa was not on the list. Africa was not on the list. So this tells me that for us to move this continent forward, we need to work together. We need to understand that the success of Nigeria is reliant on the success of other African countries. Is reliant on the success of other African countries because We are alone. People will say, "Oh, human rights is just in the mouth." It doesn't really. If you look at the real actions and the real decisions that are being made, it's as though nobody cares about human rights. If you talk about, oh, child labor is a bad thing, it's a bad thing in Europe and the Americas and the rest of them. When it comes to the children that are mining cobalt and lithium and the rest of them in DRC, it doesn't matter. There are big corporations who just come in and buy it, and they don't care how it gets into markets. This DRC and Apple conversation. Number one, we need to African leaders need to stop being a part of the problem to another African country. We need to stop it. And then we also need to realize that for our continent to work as a whole, we need to work together. The sum of all its parts. We need to work together. So I hope that the government of DRC is going to be able to resolve this thing. If it means going to court like they're already planning to do, fine, go to court. But I really hope that an end comes to this painful, painful thing that is going on in DRC. Well, that's it. That's all we can cover in this episode of the Amanda Show. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think about the different topics we've had in the comment section below. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.